Gemanda. I'd like to start by saying miigwech to Mike for starting our day out in a good way. And thank you to everyone who has made today possible, the organizers, the panelists, the presenters, and all of the attendees. The need for better education cannot be understated. Sitting here and listening to all of the presenters and panelists so far, those are some pretty big people to follow. It's hard to stand in the shadow of such incredible educators. And I'm not an educator myself, so I'll start out by being very upfront about that. I am the daughter of teachers who went on to be administrators. So while I'm not an educator, I certainly recognize the gift that it takes to be one. I'll do my best to help inform some of your conversations from a slightly different perspective. I'd like to tell you a bit about my community. We have approximately 1,500 people on a peninsula in sort of south central Ontario. We are surrounded by water on three sides. So we have these really stunning views. We're a community that's growing and changing, but also incredibly proud of who we are. We have a school, so we have 3 early learning centers in our community. We have a preschool program, a school age program, and an infant toddler program, and we'll take those little babies as young as 6 weeks to start helping in their education and supporting families. We have a school that goes up to grade 3. During the pandemic, we extended that to grade 4 because we didn't have the time to transition our children properly to new schools, and we had a lot of families that were really uncomfortable sending kids for the first time to a new school in the middle of a pandemic in person. But education has always been an integral part of our community. We had an Indian day school until the late 70s. We still have survivors of residential schools in our community too. Our language program in our school continues to grow on an annual basis. We are always looking for more resources and new teachers to continue to ensure that our children have that Anishinaabe every day. We have a language and a culture teacher at our early learning centers where we integrate that language from the earliest age, and the culture as well, because they go hand in hand to teach them those traditions and those practices. We really focus on the land learning in our community. That's a huge part of who we are, is making sure that we can connect to our land in those really good ways. It's our goal. One of our biggest challenges is finding a way to continue to educate our children in our community, immerse them in our language, and ensure that they have that access to on-land learning. We're working on improving and building a new school where we can have all of our education in one place. Right now, our 3 early learning centers and our school are spread between 4 different buildings, and we'd really like to bring them all together in one spot to make that an incredible learning hub. So that's a little bit about who we are. And then I wanted to thank Maureen, who just spoke a little bit before me. I felt that I was invited to this panel to speak about champions of change. And I think she said, we are champions of change, and I hadn't considered it from that perspective. But listening to Maureen and the other panelists and presenters, I can hear that that's who we are. We are all champions of change, and I wanted to sort of dig in and examine what a champion of change is, and we heard a little bit about what champions are. Personally, I always kind of think of the knight in shining armor with a standard that they're going to carry, just defending those who need it. And so to me, champions of change are those individuals who are teaching our children the truth of our history and ensuring that we have pride in who we are. And I can't emphasize that enough. Teaching our children after generations of being taught that we're not good enough, teaching our children to be proud of who we are. And I'm grateful for the teachers and the community in my life who taught me to be a proud Anishinaabe. And we're doing this despite the ongoing attempt in Canadian legislation to eliminate Indigenous people from the narrative of Canada. And I want to recognize those who are here today that do that every day, that you support our teachers, that are our teachers, that are the team that our teachers need to lean on and rely on to be those champions of change, to teach our children to be proud Anishinaabe, proud Haudenosaunee, proud whatever Indigenous people you are, because that pride is going to lead to the change that we need. And I think that the change and adaptation have always been a part of our cultures and who we are. And Dr. Alfred spoke to this need for constant change. But we have to be careful that we don't confuse the adaptability of our culture with the need for resiliency. We can see how quickly and painlessly during this pandemic, our elders and our educators and our communities shifted and pivoted to continue our cultural practices through this pandemic. But as Dr. Tremblay said, resiliency is about recovering from hardship. And I think we need to recognize that that's a process and not an end state. To start recovering from hard times, we have to end the things that make the times difficult. So to start this process, we need to address those issues that are still outstanding. The Indian Act and colonial governments defining us is a part of that. They've created a dispersed population across Canada where we have to find ways to pull ourselves back to each other in order to fix those educational gaps, to ensure that we have a connection between our community members, between our populations. One of the issues that I'm currently dealing with is a community member who's reached out to me to say that their child is being forced to take a second language, and they're being given no option for an Anishinaabe teacher, a teacher in our language. And the issue that they have, and I think Darren Gugu spoke to this, is that they now have to take French. French is important. French and English are important to understand those who are inhabiting our traditional territories. But we should not be forced to learn a second colonial language in the day and age of Zoom meetings and virtual learning, when those teachers are within a board and have the ability to teach our students their first language, a language that the colonial government has taken away. And so with this new virtual environment that we have all been able to access and use in new ways, there is absolutely no reason our students shouldn't be provided with an Anishinaabe classroom, regardless of where they are, in a board that has at least 10 Anishinaabe teachers. So just to that point, we need to be resilient, but we need to end the hardships that we're facing. We need to end the discrimination and extermination that continues to be perpetrated under the Indian Act. And we need to do that together. And it's conferences like this where our educators come together, support each other in teaching our children to be proud Indigenous people, that will make those things happen. One of the relationships that Curve Lake has been able to leverage is with Trent University. Trent University is about 20 minutes from our community and was the first Canadian university to offer a program in Indigenous studies, the second university in North America to do so. And in offering very early on in their history a program in Indigenous studies, they have empowered our Indigenous knowledge traditions, our Indigenous ways of knowing, in participating in that academic realm that tends to exclude those ways of knowing. But more than that, Trent University has empowered Curve Lake First Nation members to take ownership of their own education in the ways that we would like to. When I was a student, I went to Trent University and I did not want to take Indigenous studies. I had been raised in my Indigenous culture and I wanted to look at new ways of looking at the world. But I wanted to do it at home because family and community and being in our land is so integral to who I am as a human being, as a person, to that holistic mind, body, and spirit, that I was able to go out and see new ways and still be able to be at home. So as Dr. Alfred said, Trent University has allowed us to take post-secondary education and make it an engine of change instead of an engine of colonization. And I think that is critical to moving forward. I don't know that I have a lot more to offer. I have to speak at a plenary session later on for at least an hour. And I don't want to give away all the fun things that we're going to talk about, but I do want to mention that Trent University will be joining me later today to talk about how we built that relationship, how we continue to take care of that relationship as an ongoing thing, as a living, growing part of who we are and how we own our education. And that's, I think, what I wanted to share with you today. Miigwech for having me, and I hope that's a little bit of a different perspective that you can appreciate as educators.